Hello everyone and welcome to our session at the IT Pro Dev Connections 2020 event. First of all, I want to thank the organizers and everyone involved for setting up this event and for allowing us to deliver a session. We also want to thank all sponsors because without them it would be quite impossible to set up an event like this. And Micha and my session is titled Azure Bastion One does not simply walk into my VNet. We think with the title and the picture, the topic will be rather clear, and we hope that at the end of the session, everyone starts to using the Azure Bastion service. Let me also share a little bit about myself. My name is Wim Matthyssen. I live in Belgium where I work as a Cloud.Architect. Next to that, I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, so I also deliver all kinds of Azure trainings. Community-wise, I'm a founding board member of a Belgian user group called MC2MC. I also have my own blog, https://wimmatthyssen.com, where I blog a lot about my daily experiences with Azure and all related Microsoft hybrid cloud services. Since July of this year, I'm also awarded as a Microsoft MVP, what a great honor was and still is. And like most IT professionals these days, I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out or just want to say hi or ask a question about Azure Bastion, you can always contact me through my Twitter handle at @wmatthyssen or through LinkedIn. And I will now let Micha introduce himself.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Micha Wets. I'm an independent contractor, so I have my own small company. I'm a technology strategist at ASPEX. And like Wim, I'm also a member from MC2MC, an awesome user group in Belgium. Since December 2018, I became Microsoft MVP on Windows Virtual Desktop, an awesome service on Azure. I focus most on Windows Virtual Desktop, but also the services around it, mainly on Azure, Azure DevOps, automation, things like that. As you can see over here, my Twitter handle is there if you want to contact or follow me, also my LinkedIn and my blog post websites.
So on the agenda today, the things we are talking about, first of all, we will look at all common VM administrative access methods, the different ways, the good and bad ones, on how you can connect to your Azure IaaS VMs before Bastion them, followed by a demo. Then we'll talk about what Azure Bastion is and dig a little deeper in how to use and deploy it, followed by a fully focused Bastion demo. And after that demo, we'll look at the future roadmap. And at the end of the session, we'll also go through all the key takeaways to really focus on the things we think you should really remember about our session. So let us first take a look at all common VM administrative access methods. Like probably most of you know, the easiest way, but the least secure one to connect to an Azure VM is by using its public IP address, its PIP. In this way, you can connect to the VM through RDP or SSH, depending if the VM is a Windows or a Linux VM. And if you apply the network security group or NSG, like we say, and you associate it to the specific VM subnet where that specific VM runs, or even maybe on the NIC itself, you simply need to allow TCP port 3389 or TCP port 2020 to get it working. This kind of way of connecting to your Azure IaaS VMs is good for studying purposes or when you need to do a quick test in your dev test subscription, but you should never, mark my words, use it in a production environment to connect to any of your business critical or other production VMs. Because by using this way to connect to your VMs, one or both management ports will be widely opened on the internet. And in this way, your VM can easily be attacked and breached by orcs, for example. Another way to connect to your IaaS VMs is by placing them behind an Azure external load balancer. Instead of the VM, the load balancer then uses the public IP address, and you can connect to it through RDP or SSH over the public internet, just like you would do with a single VM in the previous slide, which had an associated PIP. The external load balancer will redirect the connection to the VM behind it. I think Micha and myself already saw this method being used by customers maybe one or twice. But in our opinion, it's kind of security through obscurity, like people would say, because one or both management ports are still opened on the internet. Only now there's an external load balancer in front. And again, not really a secure method to connect to your IaaS VMs in a production or pre-production environment. Because you should know, in both ways, you really can't prevent any breaches. And this because attackers mostly target those open management ports on internet-facing VMs. And with port scans, brute force attacks, or DDoS attacks, they can easily breach your VM. And in case, for example, of such a successful brute force attack, an attacker can easily compromise your VM, and by that establish a foothold into your environment from where they can do whatever they want to do. Or another example, when that server with the open management ports is, for example, an Azure IaaS web server, and that server is breached, attackers can use it to install crypto mining malware and use it for cryptocurrency mining. So if you have opened one of both of management ports, if it's RDP or SSH, and you open the associated NSG, you will see that the name that in the name field the rule name is preceded by a hazard triangle with an exclamation mark telling you that there is a security by opening these ports to the internet. Also, if you open Azure Security Center, on the recommendations, you will also see a security recommendations that management ports should be closed on those virtual machines. And as a quick fix, Azure Security Center will recommend to enable JIT for those VMs. So the question that we all need to ask ourselves then is, in which way can we securely connect to our IaaS VMs? Well, first of all, by using a site-to-site VPN or an express route. In this way, you can connect from your on-premise network to the private IP address of the VM. You can also use a point-to-site VPN, in which you can set up a secure connection to a VNet or VNets from your own computer or any secure workstation you're using. With a point-to-site VPN, you can use certificate-based authentication or radius, and these days, you can even use the OpenVPN protocol and use Azure AD authentication. An Azure resource we still see being used a lot in customer Azure environments is a jump box, or a jump host, or jump server, like some people like to name it. A jump box is a server on a network, and in the case of course in Azure, this jump box is used to access other VMs in a separated security zone, or in one of the spoke units of your, if you're working in a hub spoke model. It's a control entry point into your Azure environment, set up in a separated VNet or subnet, like a management VNet or subnet, and it improves your overall security and reduces the attack surface of your IaaS VMs. You kind of jump from that VM to your other VMs, and from there you can manage them. To allow access from the internet, this VM also uses a PIP, and most of the time is deployed as a very small Linux VM, where you kind of then tunnel your RDP connection through SSH. And instead of a Linux VM, we even saw some customers using an RDS gateway running as a small VM, and by this tunneling the RDP connection through SSL. So you can see that the jump box is a good alternative to create a secure connection, but yet it's another resource. Oh, sorry, one click too far. But yet it's another resource you need to manage, you need to update, and you need to troubleshoot. And so in the case, and you also need to foresee high availability. So when in the case that one is down, you still have a second one that you can use to connect to your managed spoke VM. So in a way to protect that jump box, because it's associated with the PIP, most of the times you can start. It's also another option to more securely connect to your IaaS VMs. and is to use, you best use just-in-time VM access or JIT. JIT enables you to lock down your VMs at the network level by blocking inbound traffic to specific management ports like RDP or SSH. And in the meantime, limit the amount of time that those management ports are open, and this for a maximum of 24 hours. In this way, it enables you to control the access and reduce the attack surface to IaaS VMs. And JIT is available when you use the Azure Defender on tier of Azure Security Center. Just keep in mind that it only supports Azure Resource Manager VMs. So no classic IaaS VM support for everyone who still runs those. How does it work? Well, first of all, a user needs to request access to a VM, and then Security Center checks if that user has role-based access permissions for that VM. If so, that request is approved, and then Security Center automatically configures the NSG to allow inbound traffic to the necessary ports, and this for the requested amount of time. When that time window is passed, Security Center automatically restores the NSG back to its previous state, by which the NSG no longer allow inbound traffic on those specific ports. A nice feature is that all of those requests can be reviewed in the activity log, so you can easily follow up and check who asks access and when they ask access. But let me demo some things to make it all a little bit more clear. So let me first open my Azure Portal. So here we are. You can see I have some VMs running in my environment. If you select the first one, the 01, let me first take the file server. So let me take this one. You can see it has a private IP address, but also a public IP address. So if I click on connect, click on RDP, download the RDP file. I should be able to connect to it. So here it is. Let me type in my super secret password. And then just click on OK. And there we are. I'm connected over the public IP address into my Windows VM with an RDP session. Let me close this one. If we look at the NSG, for example, if you go to the networking, you can see allowed RDP on 3389, and you can see the hazard triangle warning you that those ports shouldn't be open on to the internet. Let me take another VM to show JIT. So I have another Windows VM. You can see it has no public IP address associated. It just has 10.1.2.68 as IP address. So if I now click on connect, click on RDP, you can see that this VM has just-in-time VM access policy. So you first need to click on request access. Let me click on it. You can see the notification saying it's requesting just-in-time access. I'm now should be able to download the RDP file and connect to that specific VM. So let me quickly show this one also. So again, super secret password. You can see I'm now connected over the private IP address. If you look into, let me close this one. If you look into Center, go to underneath the cloud security, we select Azure Defender, and we would need to scroll down completely to the bottom, and over here you can see the just-in-time VM access. Just click on it, and you can see that specific VM has JIT enabled. Currently there are 5 tests approved, and the connection details on our ports are for RDP on 3389. I was the last user that logged in, and I can also view the activity log and so on, and you can select it. We can go through it, and you can see whoever has access to it. So that's it for this demo. I think, Micha, you can go ahead with the second part.
Yes, let me share my screen. should be visible now. Thank you, Wim, for the demo and the presentation on JIT and pip work. Next part in the presentation is Azure Bastion. What is Azure Bastion exactly, and how it can help you with connecting securely to your IaaS virtual machines. First things first, we have to take a look at the definition, of course. So Azure Bastion is a PaaS service that you provision inside your virtual network. It provides a secure and seamless RDP or SSH connectivity to your virtual machines directly in the Azure Portal over SSL. This is the definition Microsoft also published on the portal from Azure Bastion. Small overview, like the definition already tells us, Azure Bastion is a fully managed, Microsoft managed PaaS service that you provision inside your own virtual network. It provides secure and seamless RDP and or SSH connectivity directly into the Azure Portal using SSL through your virtual machines. When you use Azure Bastion, your virtual machines no longer require those public IP addresses, those PIPs assigned to your virtual machines. So you can completely remove all public IPs from your environment, which is the main idea, of course. Also, on top of that, it doesn't require any additional software. On the client side, you don't need to have any agent or any client installed on your machine. On the target machine, there's also no additional requirements. You don't need to install anything, so it's completely clientless and agentless. As you can see, it's really a hardware point, or you can even see it as a jump box as a service inside your environment. Internally, so under the hood, it's a VM scale set managed by Microsoft. So you don't really need to think about the scalability or the manageability or managing that service. Microsoft installs it as a VM scale set and handles the service for you. It offers great protection because you don't have any real endpoints or targets for bots or scanners or hackers to penetrate. It protects you from those port scans. It protects you from zero-day exploits. So it's really a great service which you can use to protect your environment. How does it work? Interesting to know, of course. Let me also enable my lazy pointer if I would need it. So the Azure Bastion service over here, it's deployed in your virtual network. So this is your own virtual network. It's VNet injected into your virtual network. It's an appliance managed by Microsoft, so you don't have to worry about it. Just deploy it. And it enables a user to connect to the Bastion service using the Azure Portal, and it's always SSL encrypted. So it uses HTTPS inside the HTML5 browser to connect to the Azure Bastion service. Wim also researched it's fully supported on Microsoft Edge and Google Chrome. So those are definitely supported browsers. I will also do the demo in Opera, which is also working, but it's not fully supported. So keep in mind, Edge, Chrome, those are perfectly supported browsers. Azure Bastion lives in its own subnet in your VNet, so it will create a separate subnet, which is a requirement from Azure Bastion. As you can see, the Azure Bastion service, it is exposed to the internet only by HTTPS, so SSL port 443. This is a requirement, of course, because your client needs to be able to connect. But the main advantage is it is the Azure Bastion service which is connected. And inside your VNet, as you can see over here, the Azure Bastion service has the SSL connection, but inside your VNet, you're using port 3389 from RDP or 22 from SSH to connect to your virtual machines. Again, as the drawing over here says, you can enable network security groups both inside and outside, which is definitely a requirement and a recommendation. In this way, no public IPs need to be assigned to your virtual machines. Only the Azure Bastion service is connected to the internet. Your virtual machines are completely attackless or even connected to the internet. Previously, I think it was 1 month ago, there was a big limitation on Azure Bastion, as you would, if you wanted to use Azure Bastion in different subnets, in different VNets, then you needed to deploy Azure Bastion in each and single VNet that you have. Which means if you would have a hub-spoke model, then you would have to install and deploy a Azure Bastion service in each VNet. Luckily, the VNet peering support for Azure Bastion currently in preview, but it is available and it is working. Wim extensively tested it, so it is functioning perfectly. So if you have such a hub-spoke model, you can definitely deploy one single Azure Bastion instance and connect to all virtual machines in each spoke or hub environment that you have. So at the moment, it fully works with your VNet peering. The VNet peering, it's, I don't know if everybody knows it, but it is a service or a possibility for you to connect multiple VNets globally. So it's definitely something to look at. Use cases, and why do you want to use Azure Bastion? We only highlighted a few. There will be more, but these are the most important ones, of course. First one, if you don't have a site-to-site or a pointer site or an express route available, and you still want to connect securely to your virtual machines, Azure Bastion is definitely the way to go. Site-to-site or point-to-site VPNs can be more expensive. So if you don't want to pay for a virtual network gateway, then Azure Bastion is definitely a good alternative. Another one, when jump boxes do not fit in the company policy or the requirements, because 3389 is not allowed, or another use case, you need HTTPS and RDS gateway is not supported, definitely something to consider if you look at Azure Bastion, because then you don't have an RDS gateway, don't have 3389 exposed to the internet, and it's still SSL on the Azure Bastion service. Next to that, if there is a requirement that you cannot deploy a IaaS VM as a jump host, and it has to be PaaS, then RDS gateway or jump box is completely out of the option. Then you will need to go for the Azure Bastion. Also, if you have a requirement or a company policy that everything needs to be Inferrise code, then Azure Bastion is the ideal solution because it is deployable using the portal, which is not Inferrise code, but it is deployable using the portal. You can do it in Azure PowerShell. You can use Azure CLI, but also RM templates. So you can use ARM templates to deploy your Azure Bastion instance. If you have additional topics or additional requirements where you also require JIT, that's perfectly possible to combine those two. So if you want to have temporary access to your virtual machines, it is possible to combine it with JIT. So you can use Bastion and JIT in the two cases. Also an important one, pricing, of course. That's sometimes a really important one. If you look at a Azure Bastion instance in West Europe, this is at this stage monthly cost of 117 euros per month each month. Important to keep in mind that you also pay for outbound data transfer. It's a bit the same as you have on IaaS VMs or any other service on Azure. Inbound traffic is most of the time for free. Is the outbound data transfer. That's something that you will be paying. The first 5 gigabytes are for free. So most of the cases for a small or medium enterprise or customers, this will be more than enough. And as you can see over here, the pricing depends on how much you will be using. If you're over 500 terabytes, you have to contact the Azure sales department, but that's something extraordinary, I think. Also depending on zones, so which zones you connect to or you are living in, and Azure Bastion needs to connect to a different zone. Also those pricings will be different. Wim also added the latest zones over here. So I have zone 1, zone 2, depends on how you will connect, which zones you will be using. Enough talk, let's see how it works and see how it will function in the Azure Portal, the Azure environment. Over here we have Wim his demo environment. We have a few virtual machines available and running. We will start with our Windows virtual machine, which is the easiest and the most known by the people. If you go to my virtual machine, you can click on Connect. And over here we have Bastion, the Bastion option. The prerequisite is, of course, that you have Bastion already deployed, but that's something that Wim will also touch and handle. So I'm going to click on Use Bastion. Quickly copy the username and the password.
It's normally not that super secret, so.
But still, it's secure.
But still, secure. It's a demo environment.
And as you can see, I am connected to the virtual machine using my Opera browser, so my HTML5 browser. And at this stage, I can simply go ahead and start managing my VM. If I want to start PowerShell, then you can start PowerShell. If you want to connect to your devices or to your environment, you can simply use any tool inside your Windows environment. It's kind of like a remote desktop connection to your environment, to your virtual machine. And as you can see, it really works quite smooth and quite as you would have in an RDP connection. This is the Windows. If you do the same in Linux, same option over there, you go to Overview, hit on Connect and Bastion, use Bastion, and the same pop-ups comes. You need to sign in with your username and the password. Click on Connect. and you will be connected to your Linux environment using port 22. My Linux knowledge is not that extreme. I know one which is really awesome to demo, and also to show how the keyboard, the clipboard is working. If you just type in curl and para.live, you get this awesome demo. Still so far my Linux knowledge, but as you can see, you can really use your Linux virtual machine or switch to your Windows virtual machine, because Azure Bastion over here, as you can see, it opens in a new window. You can quickly switch from one VM to the other VM inside your browser. So you can really manage your virtual machines. Management is something that we will touch later on, but first I want to hand it over again to Wim, so we can continue on more information on how to deploy Azure Bastion.
So thanks, Micha, for the nice demo and showing off the parrot again. I always like that one. Let me first share my slides again. So they should be showing them. So like Micha already said, let us now take a deeper look on how you can deploy Azure Bastion. That's also an important factor. It's best that before you start with any deployment that you check if the Azure Bastion server is available in your region. Micha mentioned a lot of regions, but at the moment, not in every region the Azure Bastion service is available. So my advice is to check out that first if you can deploy it. Normally in the Europe and the US regions, there shouldn't be any problem. It's available currently in 41 regions, but yeah, like I already said, some regions the service isn't yet available. After that, and in the case if you have, for example, a governance strategy in place, or if you have an Azure governance plan you need to follow, you should follow it, especially for the naming of the Azure Bastion host and for the use of the necessary resource tags. For people who don't know, with resource tags you can add extra metadata to any Azure resource. A tag always exists of a name and a value. For example, a good tag to use in combination with Azure Bastion is one that describes the VNet. And in this way, you can easily find in which VNet that Bastion host is deployed. So most of the times these days, you only need one Bastion host if you're working in the hub spoke model. So mostly you will deploy it in the hub spoke normally. Before you start deploying the Bastion host, you can already create the specific subnet in your VNet. This subnet always need to have the name Azure Bastion subnet and should be at least /27 or larger. Of course, also check if you have the necessary address space available in your VNet, because the thing we see a lot is that the complete address space is already used by other subnets, and then you can't deploy Bastion before changing the VNet address space. Yeah, what in most cases and in production environments is not directly possible. If you already protect the subnet with an NSG, you should see that all the necessary inbound and outbound rules are in place, and this to allow the necessary access on the needed ports. Otherwise, the Bastion deployment will also fail. Another important thing to keep in mind is if you're using Azure Firewall or any other network virtual appliance, you don't associate the Azure Bastion subnet in the route table. Otherwise, you end up with blocking traffic required for Azure Bastion to work. Then the Bastion host, just like your Jumpbox, requires a static public IP. If you also create this one in advance, if you use infrastructure as code, for example, you should use the standard public IP SKU. And then, like Micha already said, you can deploy Bastion through the portal. You can use PowerShell, CLI, or ARM templates. You can do it through Terraform. Whatever you want to use, it's possible these days. Like I already said on the previous slide also, to harden the subnet used by the Azure Bastion host, you can, of course, use network security groups, NSGs, and this to only allow the necessary inbound and outbound traffic. So first of all, on the Azure Bastion subnet, You should allow TCP traffic on port 443 for the service stack internet. Also allow TCP traffic on port 443 and 4443, and this for the service stack gateway manager, and this to allow all management traffic. And for example, if you're using Azure load balancers in front of your VMs, for the help probes, you should also enable port 443 for the service stack Azure load balancer. And then this will enable the Azure load balancers to detect the connectivity. And after those, you can deny any other traffic with priority 900, for example. Then also as outbound rules on the same Azure Bastion subnet, you should allow TCP traffic on ports 3389 and 22, of course, to the service stack's virtual network. So you can use RDP and you can use SSH. You should also allow the Azure Cloud Service Stack. This one holds all Azure Data Center public IPs, which among other things are required by the Bastion service to connect to the various public endpoints within Azure. And finally, on your Azure VM subnets, you should allow inbound TCP traffic on ports 3389 and 22 for your Azure Bastion subnet IP arranged. When you try to add the NSG to the Azure Bastion subnet and you receive an error, you will receive an error, like you can see on the screen, if not all required in and outbound rules are included. So if you're missing one of the required rules, you will not be able to associate the NSG and to deploy your Bastion host. And also when you try to change it afterwards, by removing or adding any inbound or outbound rule that's required, keep in mind that it will also fail if not all required rules are in place. So set it up best with infrastructure as code and leave it as this. Don't touch it anymore. If it's it works. As an Azure admin, you can also, of course, logs are very important. You can also use log diagnostics. As users connect to workloads using Azure Bastion, Bastion itself can log diagnostics of those remote sessions. You can then use those diagnostics to view which users connect to which workloads, at what time, from where they connect, and other relevant logging information you want to know. In order to use the diagnostics, you just need to enable diagnostic logs on Azure Bastion, so it's quite easy. And if you have, for example, already a log analytics workspace in place, you can connect it to that specific log analytics workspace. If you don't want to use log analytics, you can also use a normal storage account, just like you would do for other logging capabilities from other Azure services. I think Micha already touched this also. So what about JIT VM access? Good to know is that you can combine JIT with Azure Bastion, but keep in mind that you still need to request access first under the RDP tab and then go to the Bastion tab to be able to connect, because the request access button is not yet integrated under the Bastion blade. Hopefully in the future it will be. In order to access a virtual machine with Bastion, at least the following roles are required. First of all, the reader role on the virtual machine, and also to read the role on the NIC with the private IP of that virtual machine. And last but not least, you should also have the reader role on the Azure Bastion resource itself, otherwise it will not be working. You can not only connect to Windows or Linux virtual machines, but also to virtual machines in a VM scale set, or even to Dev Test Lab VMs. If you're using Dev Test Labs, you first need to enable a browser connection under, I think, by head browser connection under configuration and policies on those lab VMs. I think for the moment you can have around 25 concurrent RDP connections and around 50 SSH connections at the same time. But yeah, this can depend if there are already ongoing RDPs or ongoing SSH sessions. So normally you should be fine. What can you do in a remote session? Micha already demoed it a little bit. Well, for the moment, only copy and paste of text is supported. So you can't move any files from your desktop into the Bastion session. And you can work in the different tabs, and you can also set the screen to full screen. that's it for the moment. But let me quickly demo how we can deploy a Bastion host. So let us go back to the Azure Portal. Like you can see, I already have deployed one Bastion host. If you open that one, a nice thing as an admin is you can go into the sessions. If there are any sessions open, like those for Micha at the moment, as an admin, you can see them and you can also drop them. So if you don't want to allow access anymore, you can just drop out. So normal Micha, his session should be gone now.
There goes my session.
Yeah. The thing for the diagnostic settings, if you click on it, over here you can enable it. I already set up one which source all data in my log analytics work with. It's quite easy. You can also use the activity log just like you would do with other Azure resources. But let me also deploy a new one. Just go to Bastion. You can type it in the global search bar, open it, just click on add. There it is. Select the subscription you want to deploy it. Select the resource group. Let me, for example, no, I don't have a Bastion. Let me show the network. Give it a name, Bastion demo, for example. The region. Select West Europe. And you select the virtual network. PRD, for example. I don't have a prefix with /27. You create it. You attach a pip to it, and then you can simply create it. Just say that you have that specific subnet in place. I don't have at the moment. That's the thing I was saying. If you don't have that place anymore, so I have an Azure Bastion subnet over here, for example, in the PRD. So I normally can select that one, but it doesn't show it. It must be at 27. I show it 29. So if you change that one to a 27, it works. You just click on review and create, and you start deploying it. But yeah, like I said, these days I only deploy it in the hub spoke. So you just need one. I have peering in every spokes, so it works. So I think this ends my demo, Micha, and I think you can close our session.
Yes. Let me share the screen again. Thank you, Wim, for the demo. Future roadmap. What are the things that will come to the Azure Bastion service? These are a few of the most important ones. The most important ones we see is definitely Azure AD SSO with MFA support, PIM integration. Not many people know Azure AD PIM or use it. It's definitely a service to look into. Wim already gave a session, an interesting session about this, so definitely look at this. But also, if you want to completely remove the necessity of a public IP, then there is a roadmap item coming up for support on Azure Bastion through ExpressRoute or site-to-site VPN connections. So then the necessity of a public IP is really gone. Definitely look at the Azure feedback page where you can vote for a specific roadmap item. Before we close off, a few takeaways. So Azure Bastion, it's a Microsoft managed PaaS service to connect over SSL through your VMs using RDP or SSH. No public IP is required for your virtual machines, so that's something to definitely look at. Only one Azure Bastion host is required. Now with the public preview of VNet peering support, you don't need an Azure Bastion host in each VNet. You can have one in your hub and connect to your virtual machines in each spoke. You can harden your environment even more. You can harden your Azure Bastion VNet with NSGs, and you can harden your virtual machines with NSGs. And on top of that, you can even enable JIT. And the last one, keep an eye on your cloud spend. So if you want, you can quickly deploy your Azure Bastion instance using RM templates or Azure PowerShell. You can use it, and after that, you can remove it again until you need it to be deployed and to use it. So it's something to keep an eye on. A few references to the Azure information part. And as a last one, Wim and myself want to thank you for your attention. If you have additional questions, do not hesitate to contact us using Twitter. You can see our Twitter handles over here. So if you have any additional questions, do not hesitate to ask them on our Twitter account. And also, again, we want to thank our sponsors, the sponsors from IT Pro Dev Connections, because without sponsors, it would not be possible. And that's it from my end. Wim, you want to say something?
Yep. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. And we hope that you start using the Azure Bastion service. It's quite easy to deploy. Just deploy one. And it's a good way and a secure way to connect to your Azure IaaS VMs. If they're Windows or Linux, it doesn't matter. Just start trying it out.
Okay. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.